And we're live. Thanks you guys for joining in. Welcome to the second ever live stream of the Bitcoin Path. I'm really excited to have Robert Breedlove, Erik Cason, Dan Held, and John Vallis with me. First of all, I just want to thank you guys for being generous with your time, and also just want to mention to the audience, anyone listening, that each of these guys are going to be speaking at an event coming up this weekend called the Cosmic Deep Dive. And you can register for it and get more information at cosmicdeepdive.com. And yeah, with that, let's have just a very brief introduction from each of you guys to kind of kick this off. Robert, can we start with you?
Sure thing. My name is Robert Breedlove. I'm founder and CEO of Parallax Digital. We're a Bitcoin-focused hedge fund and consultancy. Been doing some writing and speaking on Bitcoin lately, mostly in the Twitter universe and the Medium page. And I'm excited about this event. I'm glad you were able to pull this together. I think you've got some great minds coming together for this. And I've been putting together what I want to talk about, and there's just a little bit of an idea of what I'm thinking about lately. Is I think 2020 was a major feather in the cap for the sovereign individual thesis. So I want to explore that a little bit. I think it's a really important book. I talk about it a lot. I don't think a lot of people in Bitcoin have read it, but most people in the world have never even heard of it. They have no idea what's going on. So I hope to touch on a few of those concepts and what the world looks like with the emergence of Bitcoin and how the game theory surrounding it sort of reshapes society going forward.
That sounds awesome. The Sovereign Individual was a huge formative resource for me over the last year. I just read it back to back 2 times and really helped me a lot. Erik, how about you?
Yeah, my name's Erik Cason. I've been in the Bitcoin space since, about 2012 is when I started getting interested. In 2013 is when I really dived deep. I was at Coinbase from 2013 to 2017. And then in 2017, I kind of started writing my own stuff at Crypto Sovereignty. And I'm very interested at kind of the intersection of cryptography and sovereignty, and specifically kind of Bitcoin as the shilling point sort of in between the two. And yeah, also at this conference, I did have a pretty large piece I was going to do, but I think I'm going to just trim it down to trying to cover what I'm just calling the pedagogy of Bitcoin, or more accurately, the critical pedagogy of Bitcoin, about how do we learn using Bitcoin and what's sort of that process, and how do we uncover and learn more. And then if I have time, I'll kind of go deeper into my own work about the intersection of sovereignty and Bitcoin specifically. So that's a bit about me.
Rad, I can't wait for that. It sounds awesome. Dan, how about you?
So I'm Dan Held. I've been around in the space for a little while, worked at a couple different crypto companies, started to write about my thoughts on Bitcoin back in 2018, just a little bit of my self-discovery on things like proof of work and Bitcoin's origin story. Part of that was wrapped up into a series called Planting Bitcoin. And that's what I'm going to write about, but a remastered version of it. So I've got a designer named Sven, and he helps me animate some various Bitcoin illustrations that I think make it a little bit more compelling. I think Bitcoin can be often kind of dry and full of jargon and very technical. So this distills it down into a more digestible story with like a very sleek black deck with white font and white graphics that really pop and explain various aspects of Bitcoin, I think, in a little bit more compelling way than people are used to. So it's a little blend of your classic blog post meets deck meets short videos. So kind of a combination of all those combined.
Sven's the fucking man. Love that
Thanks,
guy.
John.
And his work and the work he does for you.
Appreciate it.
Awesome. John?
Yeah, my name is John Vallis. I host the Bitcoin Rapid Fire podcast. Yeah, I don't really know what else to say. I mean, I caught the Bitcoin bug like a lot of other people. I've come to realize recently that, one of the underlying themes for my entire life, the travel and different domains that I've poked my nose into has been this, this idea, this, deep yearning for freedom and the surrounding philosophies and ideas and practices and tools, etc. And, Bitcoin has just poured gasoline on that fire. And, I continue to try to understand it as best I can. And in particular, and the type of stuff I like to dig into in the interviews that I do, is exploring how this is changing individual behavior and what is emerging as a result of mass individual behavior change. And so, i.e., what kind of a culture, what kind of society, what kind of market, et cetera, is this new phenomenal, fantastic tool fostering? I always go back to, anything can be, we know things based on effectively what they foster or the behaviors that they allow for. And so that's what this is all about. Bitcoin is a phenomenal tool, but it's a tool. What matters is what it fosters. And I really like to explore what the emerging thing is that it's fostering, and then the individual stories of the people that are involved in that. That's what gets me off the most.
Awesome. Thanks so much, John. I really concur with that. One of the things that comes to mind that I've thought about a lot over and over is Jesus talking about, you will know a tree by its fruits. And that's kind of helped me to navigate this whole realm. As I've had my own doubts and questions and wondering what the hell is going on, looking at the Bitcoin community and looking at what is being produced by this code within people, within economies, institutions, and everything has been instrumental in helping me in restoring my confidence, I guess, in hope for the future, and restoring confidence sharpening my confidence in Bitcoin itself. So that's awesome. As far as a general framework for this conversation, I don't want to hold any sort of strict structure, but I did want to center around the concept of how understanding Bitcoin for you guys personally has changed your life or impacted you in a positive way, maybe in a negative way too, or a mixture of ways in which things have changed for you in your life. This whole conference, the Cosmic Deep Dive, is an effort to help give people an opportunity to just like immerse themselves in this world for a couple days. And so maybe Dan, since you're a little more pressed on time, maybe open up a little bit about how that's affected you.
In terms of like my journey in Bitcoin.
Yeah. How's understanding Bitcoin kind of on a deeper level impacted you?
Well, Bitcoin is this intersection of many different elements of understanding how humans operate at a very, very basic level. Incentive alignment, understanding that humans respond to incentives. You've got that combined with the physics element of it, which is, with the proof of work and how essentially Bitcoin is rooted in the real world with this tie to real world energy usage. I think that's a fascinating overlapping domain. Then you've got encryption and basic understanding over how public-private keys work and what that means for your coins. And then so you've got all these overlapping dynamics that I think after you go down this rabbit hole, you've added essentially if imagine you walk around and all you see is black and white, and then you've layered in these additional colors. Like now you can see in yellow, blue, and red. You can now see in this different spectrum of colors. And I'm not gonna phrase this in a way that makes it sound good. I think it's actually pretty shitty to wake up to like the reality of how bad it is. Once you start to challenge the assumptions of money and state, then you go down the rabbit hole of everything. You start to challenge like school systems and military industrial complex and FDA, FCC. And once you go down that rabbit hole, it's impossible not to see everything else with that new perspective and go, well, this seems messed up as well. So it's a blessing and a curse. You've woken up to the reality, but the reality is pretty dismal. it's Bitcoin, I think for me, is the only hope for us for freedom. And I hope that with the inception of Bitcoin in people's minds, where they choose to believe in Bitcoin, that then begins their journey to unlock a whole new level of human freedom, of first questioning money and state, then you start to question everything else. And through that is the road to libertarian ideology of letting people be free. So I think that it's an incredible, that's why I believe so much in Bitcoin's, all of our work keeping Bitcoin alive and enabling it to succeed. I don't think it needs us, but I think that we all in aggregate represent it, right? And we can hopefully push forward this future state that we hope will come into existence faster if we help craft narratives and make things simpler to understand. I mean, that's why I started writing, is I wanted to, I went down my rabbit hole and I was like, well, what if I can make that journey a little bit shorter for everyone else? And so then I started to write content. So I think Bitcoin represents, it's you're being orange pilled, you're waking up to this reality, but it is not a pleasant journey. It's an exciting one, but it's a very harsh one too. I mean, also, once you wake up to this, you want to tell all your family and friends, right? Well, none of them are going to believe you for a long time. And it's been 8 years for me. So it's, it can be a little demoralizing at times, but it's pretty cool to see it happen in real time. And then today we had the article about how gold, it was a Bloomberg article where it talked about how Bitcoin is going to negatively impact gold. And I've waited 8 years to see this moment. So for me, it's an incredible triumph that Bitcoin has existed, survived, thrived to make it here. So yeah, what's the journey like? Well, you're going against the grain of everyone else. Any investment in human history, if you bet on something, you're betting that the market has not priced it accurately. And so with Bitcoin, if you look at how much it's moved in price, that's essentially how much against the grain you went. You went against, if you bet in Bitcoin, you bet on the craziest, wildest, biggest bet in human history. This is not another VC backed startup. This is like the remonetization of the world into a new asset. And I mean, that's the amount of fundamental change that occurs in the brain when you go down that rabbit hole is huge.
100% agree in terms of just my own emotional state, observing my own emotional state as I've learned more and more about what exactly is going on. It really is like being unplugged in the matrix, seeing all the energy farms and just being absolutely disgusted of what has occurred in humanity. I don't want to talk too much. I want you guys to jump in. I wonder if any of Erik, you got some thoughts there?
Yeah, I'll just jump in on the back of what Dan was saying, kind of with what I was going to be presenting around this idea of kind of critical pedagogy. It's about how we learn things. And to Dan's point, like it's like a shitty experience when you learn like, oh, like I'm actually like a fiat money slave, and like people are constantly taking advantage of me and stealing from me in these very discreet and guileful ways that like I can't actually detect at all. And like there's this whole system against me, and like now I have to figure out how to use Bitcoin, and like maybe I can fucking nuke myself in that, like maybe I can forget my private keys, and you're not totally clear on how it all is at first. And it can be like a very scary and threatening experience. But I think with that, there's also the experience of true freedom, and kind of to Erik Fromm's idea about the fear of freedom. Like that's a very, very intimidating thing. Like we don't really fully understand what it means to have full freedom to do things, to take your own wealth into your own hands and to be totally responsible for that. And having been around for a few years, I can testify, I've seen cases where people have messed this up and they have, worked against themselves because perhaps they didn't understand Bitcoin in the detailed way that they needed to. But again, even though this is like a hard and difficult and arduous journey, in the same way that trying to climb a mountaintop is a difficult journey, at the end of it, you've learned a whole lot. You feel self-sufficient. You're able to take care of yourself. And furthermore, all of the crises that kind of come up in the process of that journey, you are able to approach and overcome. And I think that these are all very important things to have people go through. And hopefully through the work that we're all kind of collaboratively creating together, we can make that journey a little less difficult. Perhaps we can create a path along the mountain as opposed to us needing to forge our own ahead and to recreate the wheel. So I just wanted to speak to that because I thought I've been thinking a lot about this critical education process and what it means to come to terms with, you know, the state is an oppressive apparatus, the financial system's an oppressive apparatus, all of the various forms of identity that you're forced onto you. Like, they're all these things that seek to control you, perhaps for your own safety, but they seek to control you first and foremost to control you.
Definitely. And just as an aside, when I was coming up with the logo for the Bitcoin Path, I had this image in my head of just a spiral going up a mountaintop, basically. And in the logo, the first bend of the spiral goes like really far down, and then like almost off the mountain, and then kind of like comes back. And so it's kind of symbolic, I guess, of how it is, I guess, in reality. Robert, you got something to jump in here with?
Yeah, I think the analogy to the Matrix is really apt. Orange pilling, I think it used to be red pilling, and now it's just become orange pilling. That scene, actually, if you just think of when Neo wakes up and he sees the farms and he's unplugged, that's actually what the experience feels like when you come to see the entirety of the socioeconomic structures that govern your life are premised on a pyramid scheme that we call fiat currency, right? It's a big pill to swallow. People that may attach their identity to their nationality or to the US dollar to think that, wow, this thing really is, you know, perhaps the greatest con in human history. It is the classic bait and switch. We introduced a paper currency to make gold more transactable, right? It held value over time, but it didn't do well over space. So we abstracted it into paper to give it that functionality. But we introduced an attack vector for intermediaries to attack. And that's what the history of the state and money has been. It's just one exploitation after another of that attack vector. And, you know, we're living through this digital age, which is clearly an age of its own. We've passed the industrial age into something special. And I think Bitcoin is just the greatest testament to our age yet. It's going to be the thing that advances us most into the future. And so it's just so exciting to be working to, and on one hand, see something so incredibly dark, but on the other hand, have something like Bitcoin that is just unbelievably brilliantly illuminated, and the potential to disrupt that. And to speak a bit to myself, how Bitcoin has changed me in a lot of ways, but I think one general one is that I think probably a lot of Bitcoiners are this way, tend to be type A, pretty assertive, aggressive type, you know, very curious. And it incites your curiosity, actually. Whatever natural curiosity you have, I think it will just 10x that after a year or so of studying Bitcoin. But it's also curbed my aggressiveness. I've become much more patient. You know, as we say in the Austrian economic circles, my time preference has been lowered. So I really think it's made me a better person, across a lot of other dimensions as well, but we'll just name that for now. And I think this experience that I've had, this is what helps entrepreneurs be better, right? The more patient and more long-term an entrepreneur can be, the better they are for civilization. Like, the more people you have thinking like that, by definition, the more civilized we become, right? The lower the time preference comes for society. And I think that's the big change here is we currently live in a world being led by bureaucrats from the back, right? A president can press a button on this side of the world and drop bombs on the other side of the world. Whereas historically, we've been led by leaders from the front, right? Like Napoleon would lead his troops into battle, and he had skin in the game. So I see Bitcoin as restoring that natural balance. We're actually re-empowering entrepreneurs and devitalizing bureaucrats. And that advances civilization in so many ways, because not only are we lowering time preference, but we're also giving them the tools necessary to innovate, create more wealth, and advance society. So I like that lens on Bitcoin, is that it's this money purpose built for entrepreneurial empowerment, accountability, and adventurousness. So now everyone is more free than ever to go out into the world as a self-sovereign entrepreneurial actor, solve problems, add value to society, and store their wealth in a money that can't be compromised, can't be confiscated, can't be inflated. So that's the big shift, I think, restoring skin in the game to humanity. It restores the natural order of things. So in a way, it's like Bitcoin is this implementation of natural law. And, that's the rabbit hole, man. We think this is normal, all of this around us, but this is very artificial relative to history.
100%. Dan, we've got like 5 more minutes for you. I wonder, there's just so much here, and maybe, do you have any closing thoughts as to, because I feel like you have an experiential basis for approaching Bitcoin. You've been around the block. You've been through certain cycles, especially as we're coming into this bull run cycle. Perhaps you have some words of wisdom for us.
For Bitcoin content creators or for Bitcoiners in general?
Bitcoiners in general.
Yeah, I mean, not your keys, not your coins, right? We're on the precipice of potentially the US Treasury enacting some higher KYC AML regs on when you withdraw your coin. So obviously, like, everyone should be doing private key management, self-custody private key management. It's pretty crazy to see the precipice that we're on in terms of what that means. Like, if the Treasury goes ahead with this, I mean, it's a pretty aggressive move. I mean, you can bring your cash to a bank. They don't ask you to, and when you withdraw your cash, here's $200. Go ahead. It's not like we go and a merchant asks you where you got your cash from when you buy your groceries, right? So it's a pretty bizarre regulation. So I think, like, not your keys, not your coins is a core guiding Bitcoin principle. I think, like, ultimately, I think we're going to see a new level of FUD in the cycle. So we've gone through all sorts of FUD throughout Bitcoin's history. Bitcoin's dying. China's regulating Bitcoin. Proof of work is inefficient. There's been a million narratives, right? I don't know what narratives are going to come up, but I think hodlers this cycle, luckily, they've got a lot of great content. Like some folks on this call have great content, and there's books and podcasts and all sorts of great ways to reinforce the faith and belief in Bitcoin. But we will encounter some FUD. I think that will be next level, government banning level FUD, like not from countries like India or something, but maybe like a Western developed country, like a European one. So I think that, just gird yourselves and have the faith in Bitcoin while we go through this, that you can't stop an idea whose time has come. And I think Bitcoin's time has come, and there's no way to stop it. But we will encounter some rough waters ahead.
Amen. That's a very sobering piece of advice there.
And with this, I got 1 minute left anyway, so I got to head out. Great chatting with you guys. Thanks for having me. Cheers.
Thanks so much for coming on, Dan.
See you, Dan.
All right, John. I've just enjoyed your podcast, you sharing your journey, being so transparent, being so vulnerable, and just getting into raw conversation with the plebs. What are your thoughts as you hear these guys talk?
Well, if you're referring to kind of the journey, I mean, I echo a lot of the things that the other guys have said, and I think a lot of, I know from my conversations with so many Bitcoiners that the same is true for a lot of them. And of course, we all have different ways that we've come about this, and we were, slightly or grossly different people beforehand. My own perspective is I was always like the super curious guy or kid or whatever, so I was interested in pretty much everything I could get my hands on, big reader as a kid, that kind of thing. But as I emerged as like in my early 20s, the world didn't seem like I kind of had that matrix moment that everyone's referred to today, waking up in the machine world or whatever it is. Like I was becoming really disheartened with the way things were. And you'd read about how the medical industry and the pharmaceutical industry and the energy industry and the weapons industry and the lobbying and all these different things, you learn how they work. And you're just like, oh my God, like, how does this get turned around? Because this is nasty. This is not serving humanity. This is not promoting freedom of the individual. And that led me down a lot of different rabbit holes. But the punchline was, I guess, I kind of developed a little bit of hopelessness. Like I've talked a lot about the psychedelic rabbit hole, and that certainly allowed me to at least, it wasn't an escape, but it at least gave me a sense of comfort that there was something far grander at play here. Whatever we were, us monkeys were doing in our worldly, toil and conflict and how we organized each other, there was something greater afoot. And I took some solace in that, I guess. And I investigated that realm, heavily, and still do. And it's still, I think it's still very intriguing intellectually and for other reasons for me. But, in my early 20s, I kind of relegated myself to like, I threw my hands up. Like, I don't know how this is going to get fixed. So I just went on and did what people do, try to chase the carrot for a while and make the best of it. And, Bitcoin, like so many people, first it's a touch, and then you're intrigued, and then you're interested, and then you learn more and more until it's totally all consuming. And so for me, it really was that focal point that allowed all my different interests and all the different pursuits and, and things I've been learning about and studying about and thinking about for so long, they all kind of converged on this one thing, which is why it's so amazing to be involved in it. Cause I just get to spew out all that stuff I've accumulated over the years, whether it's like refining my perspective or actual bits of information and knowledge. And so for one, I have a huge sense of gratitude now, that Bitcoin is around, that I've been able to engage in it, and that I'm able to have these conversations and interact with the community in the way I've done. And just a funny anecdote on that point, I think it was yesterday, I was doing something and I thought, oh shit, it's like December 8th. It's almost the end of the year. And then my immediate like internal thought was, man, what a great year it's been. And then I laughed at myself because I was like, this would be the fucking worst year ever, like on the surface. But it's been so great to be a part of this thing and, play the small role that I play. And so that's how revivifying this thing is. That's how rejuvenating it is. That's, and that's the hope piece, and not all of it. I mean, it can get very complex, but for me, it pulled me out of that, I guess, kind of lull I was in my younger years, like in my 20s, I guess. And it's given me, a hope for the future. And to the time preference thing, it's what I'm really liking. Like I said before, I'm really enthusiastic about what's going on here. We don't know what's going on. These are great, and the more the better. The opportunity for us to just get together, smash our heads together, and see what comes up. Maybe a novel insight or some unique way of articulating things. That's why I think it's so good to do these things pretty much as possible. But we don't know what this is. We're in the eye of the storm. We won't know what it really is or was until many years later and we reflect back on it. But what I do know for myself to be one of the things that's, I've noticed internal changes happening almost automatically is, and I'll make the assumption that Bitcoin is going to succeed. And I know that's an assumption and perhaps a dangerous one, but for the sake of this, what I'm about to say, let's just say that Bitcoin continues to do its thing. To know that you have that degree of financial security, to me, I feel like it's freeing me up not to be so focused on financial concerns of what my activities are. And I think that's good. And I also think it's good, for I guess a tangential reason, is because like, I think it's allowing people to maybe lean into or adhere more strongly to, their principles or ethics or a type of morality that they may have or may have had, but it's never been as practical to engage in it. You've always kind of, you've always had to be on that hamster wheel and just, go to get what to make your way in the world. And the weird element of knowing that Bitcoin is providing this degree of security, I think it's allowing, to put it succinctly, allowing these things that maybe we pushed aside in service of more practical concerns to reemerge within us, and for us to understand them better, to kind of grapple with what are our principles and our ethics and our morals and our values. And then once we refine our understanding of that, to actually express them and not have the world tell us that they're not, you needn't concern yourself with such things, or not allow our principles to be determined by what's socially acceptable in the zeitgeist of the times that we're in, So for people to be able to express absolute, principles or values or morals that they may have, and to have the confidence to not only express them, but to talk about them and to refine them, and have the humility to throw them out there into the mix and let them do battle, and then, reintegrate them, and, that whole ongoing process. And so that's what's been so exciting for me, is like, and, to put the punchline on, it's like, it seems like the reemergence of, what can broadly be called good in the world. And what's more hopeful than that? So, the energy that, being involved in something like that bestows on me, and I know, lots of other people, it's just, it makes it all so easy and enjoyable and exciting, and I'm addicted. Nothing's better than that.
100%. I'm totally with you, man. It feels as though there is, I was talking to Gigi about this the other day, how there is almost like the Bitcoin world, and then the fiat world, if you want to call it, but, or the legacy system, the legacy world. And coming into this space has really opened my eyes to a completely alternate reality that exists right now on the earth, that's actively pervading every, all of our minds and all of our lives. But a lot of people are completely unaware of it. And that's something that I've kind of I've been frustrated by, and wanted to try to grab as many people and show them, what's going on as much as possible. But I'm also learning that, not everyone, it's not time for everyone. So that inward journey is probably the most important thing, I suppose. Erik, Robert, do you have something to jump in here with?
Yeah, I can jump in. So I completely agree with Vallis that there's something bigger afoot here, right? Money is a big deal, right? Just to understand what money is, how it shapes the relevance of the world around us, how it shapes our interactions, our time preference, all these things. So a disruption to money has massive cascading consequences across the world, but there's something even deeper about Bitcoin, and that it does seem to be this moral change as well. It's a more moral money, you could say. And there's a lot of arguments around this, you know, like tools tend to be amoral, so how can a money influence you? But I've written some about it in detail, but my general precept is that if theft is integrated directly into the intersubjective fabric of trust, which is money, right? We're supposed to be able to trust the value and utility of money such that we can cooperate with strangers, right? We can engage and trust minimize interaction. But when you integrate theft directly into that fabric, how could that not be corrosive to your morality, right? You're talking about this thing that you need to trust to get on with anyone outside of your inner circle. So all the other 7.5 billion of us, and it's just stealing from you all the time. Of course, that's going to mess with you at a very deep level, maybe in ways you don't understand. So Bitcoin, by fixing that, it is a moral renaissance or a moral elevation of mankind, and that's super exciting to think about. And another thing that came to mind when John was talking, I felt throughout my career mainly that I always had to restrict myself a little bit. I had to just be cautious with my words. I always felt like I had to kind of rein myself in to get on effectively with others. And there were certain thoughts that I may be deemed worthless. Like I spent some time before Bitcoin, this was around 2005, 2006, going down the central banking rabbit hole, and had determined essentially that it was at the bottom of a lot of problems in the world. But I developed a hopelessness as well. It's like there's nothing that could be done about it. There was no way to disrupt this monopoly on money, and it is what it is. So I, after a couple of years, ended up just joining the fiat regime and chasing the dollar for a while. And I think with that, I felt restricted all the time. Every business interaction I had, I always felt a little veneer of falsehood. Everything felt a little scammy. Every deal, and I can only really see this in retrospect. But now working in Bitcoin, it's like I feel totally whole, and I feel totally unrestricted to just express my thoughts, to communicate anything that comes to mind, to just be my authentic self, and I have no fear about it. I have no internal restriction. I'm experiencing nothing like that at all. So it's freeing, not only in an economic sense that you're liberated financially, but I would argue your internal workings become more liberated as a result. Something about interacting with this money or studying this money, it does really change you. And the other thing about goodness coming back into the world, I got this definition from author of Paradise Lost, John Milton. He said that evil is the knowledge that believes itself complete. And I feel like that's what, call it communism, call it socialism, call it central banking, any of these bureaucratic models that basically say they decree what is, right? Versus creating an environment that's conducive to the discovery of truth and the constant renewal of the system. They try to implement a system that is a permanent answer and say, this is the truth. That is by definition evil, right? You have said, my knowledge is complete. Here is the map that you operate by. There is no swaying from the plan. And that's what causes societies to tear themselves apart, is you implement this singular unified plan. Reality changes, right? We live in a universe pervaded by entropy. Things change all the time. If that plan doesn't change and adapt, then it becomes more and more detached from reality until, like as we saw in Soviet Russia, towards the end, everyone's an informant, everyone's committing treason. It's illegal to be sad. Like you get these crazy tyrannical consequences when you try to implement a system that your knowledge is complete. So I think that, yeah, we're just seeing this kind of a lesson we learned already in trying to control the totality of an economy in Soviet Russia. We're now seeing that repeat itself a bit in the market for money. And I think, I tweeted this the other day too. It's like, we all came for the profits. I don't think there's anyone that came to Bitcoin not for the profits. I mean, maybe some super libertarian guys that just got it right off the bat. I was not one of them. Even with the study of central banking in the background, it still took me some time to get it. But that's not what keeps you here, right? What keeps you here are the principles. Like, you get to the bedrock of these principles and what it represents for the world. And that's you plant your roots in that, you're not going anywhere. And I think that is what helps Bitcoin, helps Bitcoiners make the world better.
So just to contrast the principles of Bitcoin with what we have seen. So like, you're describing the fiat system as a systematic theft system, and it's built on lies and everything like that. How does Bitcoin represent the antithesis to that?
I would just say Bitcoin is universally visible, right? It's a voluntary game. The rules are unchangeable. So if you're going to play any game, you're going to play the game of chess or Monopoly, and you're going to give one player the ability to twist the rules arbitrarily at any point during the play. How do you think that game would end? Like, the player with the ability to manipulate the rules. Actually, I got this from Cason's work. I think it was a quote by Carl Schmitt. Sovereign is he who decides the exception, right? Whoever gets to decide the exception to the rules is the power of that game. And Bitcoin gives us an exception-proof game, right? There's a game with rules that cannot be broken. Therefore, the best strategy is to play fair and to be a true free market capitalist, an entrepreneur that only can create value for himself or herself by serving their fellow man or fellow woman. That's the breakthrough that Bitcoin is.
%. I think it's so foreign, that concept is so foreign, I think, to so many people's minds. That, I don't know. I was talking to this girl last night, and she was saying, like, well, all this freedom talk, it seems so utopian. It's like you're trying to idealize how this particular society would look, and I was trying to communicate, no, this is not a this is a scary thought, like that you have the responsibility to benefit your fellow man in order to survive. And it's scary, but I guess it's essential to life. Like, there's no other way around it. Erik, what do you think?
Yeah, I think, and I mean, like, I think she has a good point from her standpoint. It's understandable. Like, how can you think this Bitcoin thing that's like only 12 years old, like that's a bunch of nerds, like, how is that going to change the world? And I think that this is part of the whole journey, is going through and discovering all these things and eventually coming to a place where I think some of us are, is that, like, we've kicked the tires, we've looked this thing over, we've explored it, and kind of at the apex of my work, like, I actually declare that this thing is messianic, because, like, it has all of these things in it, and it reactivates all of this goodness in the world. And I think, like, part of the whole equation that makes it really funny, in my opinion, is that, like, it's becoming the most valuable object in human existence that's influenced us to be good and to transact and exchange and advance civilization in all these really powerful ways. And it's doing it just by being fair. Like, that's it. The only thing that happened in the Bitcoin system is that theft was made so it is no longer a predication that generally happens in the system. And I mean, hell, it's even still allowing for the rules to mean if I beat you up and take your private key, I still win. It's just saying, hey, we're not going to build any backdoor systems here that steal from you. And when you really start to take a step back, it is astounding to realize that the entirety of the fiat monetary system at each different level, like from the initiation of fiat money as an actual currency, to the way that it is fractionally reserve lent, to the way that it's, derivatives are created, and, on and on, there are all of these small systematic crimes that allow for us to exist in a world that, one of my latest pieces that was just published, 21, is in The Hope of Bitcoin. I go into how it leaves us with this nihilism. this idea of maybe we are just criminal. Maybe it is just about getting as much money as we can. Like maybe we can't be more powerful than these systems. And part of the reason is because we've operated on this mandate of authoritarianism for so long. And a large thesis in my own work around crypto sovereignty is inverting the Hobbesian dictum of sovereignty, which the Hobbesian dictum of sovereignty, which he wrote in Leviathan, is that not truth, but authority creates legitimacy. And like, that's the entire methodology of how the state creates power, is it's the final purveyor of truth through its authority because of the legitimacy it ascribes to itself. So Bitcoin has essentially taken that equation and flipped it on its head. And it says, no, like actually, we're going to create this new monetary system that's predicated by the truth of the system itself. We have all these ways to check on this public blockchain to ensure that other people are utilizing correctly, that people are using their private keys as intended so that others aren't using it. And through all of these actions, we've now created this new system that allows for truth, not authority, to create legitimacy. And because we're coming away from this authoritarian world that, has successfully, and I would argue it's implemented a formula of communism since the end of World War II and the restructuring of the entire banking system through the Bretton Woods. And it did it in a very sneaky and guileful way, so much so to the extent that I don't even think those who were implementing it fully understood it. And so standing at the back end of all of this, 70 years later, we now have to unravel this whole system. And as we do it, we're essentially discovering that this authoritarian system, as things escalate between us, like it's going to become very clear they don't want fair money in the world. If there's fair money in the world, who's going to pay for war? War is an extremely profitable endeavor for very, very, very few people. And it just so happens to be that those few people are the same people that control the banking monetary systems. They're also the ones that happen to be controlling the military industrial complex. So I guess in short, responding to the individual who's telling you that, like this all seems like a kind of fantasy, it kind of is. And that's why you have to look it over so many times repeatedly, because like once you kind of get it, it is like tripping on acid for the first time. You realize that there's this whole other place that's going on. And even when you come out of it, like you can't go back. You still see all of those things. And I think it's really important because this is part of the iterative process that we all must go through in order to be able to truly understand, there is this extraordinary value inside of Bitcoin. So much so that I call it messianic, and I'm open to debating that. But, as far as I can tell, it seems like it'll be easier to say it's messianic 50 years out when Bitcoin has started to unravel all these things. And we find that we're living in this totally new world because of what it's done.
One of the things that you talked about there reminded me of one of the things that the creature from Jekyll Island talks about, how the banking cartels basically acquired so much power by utilizing smuggling lines, utilizing their ability to smuggle money, valuables, gold, weapons during times of war and during times of restricted travel. And it kind of reminds me, basically of what's going on right now. We're seeing a massive restriction of travel and a trend that's developing that I see kind of becoming greater and greater into the future. I wonder, just thought about that as sort of this real world problem that could be developing right now, that some of these back end dealers and looters have somewhat of an upper hand on. Like it's one of the problems that a lot of us are dealing with, right, is recognizing the state's control of meat space, and realizing that, we do have something very special here with Bitcoin, but we also have to live in this other realm and move about freely and interact with people. So I wonder if you guys have thought about that particularly, and how you're orienting your lives accordingly.
Well, I mean,
Clarify further if you want.
You know, I think being in Bitcoin, yeah, like we can get pretty starry-eyed here, and the truth is, you know, we're still small, we're still nascent. Like, we're just getting to the spot in this where the state's going to fight us, and it's going to be very interesting because, like, I think a lot of us has kicked the tires here and probably realized that, you know, the encounter with the state is coming, and I think we all feel pretty confident about the way that the network operates, the way that cryptography protects us, and these sort of things. And I think it's really important that, you know, I think they're going to go for the low-hanging fruit first, and that's going to be, you know, target exchanges. You take out Coinbase, you know, you get 10% of people's sovereign funds, and hey, it turns out you've deployed USDC coin too, so you can just give them the equivalent value of Bitcoin, and off you go. So I think it's going to be pretty interesting, but I guess the best I can really say is, you know, your security is a one-time thing. You know, you keep your Bitcoin off exchange, not because of the possibility that maybe it'll happen one day, but because that is a non-zero chance. And if it does happen, it kind of collapses everything for you. So you should be very considerate about how you're choosing to store it and what your methodology of recovery is going to be.
Yeah. I, you know, we live in very bizarre times where, you know, a lot of the things, to go back to the sovereign individual, I mean, this pretty much exact scenario was outlined there. And I agree with Erik in that the fight is just getting started. And, you know, sometimes we've all heard this saying that, you know, good times create weak men create bad times create strong men create good times. And sometimes I lament, I'm like, man, do we have to be, you know, the in the bad times? Do we have to become the strong men? Do we have to be the strong men that are born of the bad times? You know, couldn't we just be in one of the other eras or something? But one, I think that's part of why there's such a impetus for a lot of this transformation that we're seeing when people come into this space. And again, very little of it is probably conscious. They're just responding to their environment and trying to become as fit and adaptable as possible for an environment that they're increasingly they're perceiving with increasing clarity. And so, you know, to that end, whether it's how you manage your Bitcoin, whether it's the considerations you make for your physical location and your security and all that kind of stuff. I mean, these are all things that, you know, I would say a prudent Bitcoiner, and I would love to think, you know, just individuals in general, but we'll keep the focus on Bitcoiners here, are actively considering. You know, they're considering effectively how can I establish the greatest degree of freedom for my situation? And everyone has different situations. Some people have families, some people are free birds, some people are, you know, have passports that aren't conducive to ease of travel and stuff like that. But yeah, I think this is why we see these transformations taking place, because we recognize that the environment we're in and the likely environment that we'll move into before all this is the renaissance that we also like to talk about, is probably one that we're going to have to be, you know, pretty on our toes and learning how to do that as effectively as possible, while also still having fun throughout the process. Because, like, what's a revolution without fun? You don't even want to be involved in a revolution like that, right? So you've got to balance it. You've always got to strike that balance. But you know, my life has definitely been disrupted because of the responses to COVID, and you know, and so I'm making plans now to try to establish, you know, the lifestyle that I like, and I'm hoping the world changes too, because I think there will be, you know, there'll be a demand for greater freedom for those people that are able to seize it. And it's probably going to be a scenario where, you know, things are changing very quickly in different domains. And if you know, if you can, maybe, you know, the next 5 to 10 years there's a lot of activity for you. Like, I don't think it's going to be calm, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And so everyone's going to figure out what the best situation is for themselves. But I think the prudent thing is just to be prepared for be prepared for the worst and hope for the best. And so, manage your stuff as best you can, and be ready to adapt, because, I don't have to tell any of you this, but we're really in the kind of anything can happen sort of historical territory right now, I feel, and that's the funny thing about history. It's like, it's not like pick your place where whatever crazy atrocity, tragedy, momentous historical event happened. It's not like everyone was sitting around there 2-3 years before it happened, be like, that's totally going to happen in 2 or 3 years, and we're all going to be fucked. You don't think it's going to get that bad. And so you're complacent, and you're just saying, oh, it's not so bad. It's not so bad. It's not so bad. It's not so bad. And then it's so bad that you can't do anything about it. And so, I've seen rationale and logic and reason. I knew it was in short supply in the world prior to this year, but it seems to be damn near irrelevant at this point. And when you exist in an environment where that's the case, where things are based purely on temperament, emotion, and relative ideas of safety and common good and whatever else you fill in there, things can get bad very quickly. And there's lots of historical precedents to illuminate that. And so, we got to be savvy to that and do our best to protect ourselves and our loved ones, and continue, I think, building and contributing to what I'm sure we all feel is the counterbalance to that, is the solution to that. And that is Bitcoin and all of its, its attendant things, like its culture and its community and its technology and all that other stuff. And beyond that, there's a certain degree of, fate or momentum to this that we're going to be subject to one way or the other. It's just a matter of how well we navigate those seas, I guess.
For sure. Robert,
Yeah.
You're going to jump in?
I can definitely jump in here. Every time John talks, I just start getting filled up with all kinds of things to say. There's a reason the velocity of money collapsed in the wake of COVID. And it's because the most pragmatic response to uncertainty is optionality, right? People want to hold cash because they don't know what the fuck's going on. I would say that's a good general theme for the next decade. You want a lot of options because we don't know what's going to happen. So you want liquidity, you want citizenship optionality, anything that you get from an outside service provider or the state, you should have some kind of fail-safe backup plan for that. I'm not trying to be a doom and gloomer, go hide out in your bunker for the next decade, but you just need to think about the things, right? Hope for the best, plan for the worst. And part of what leads me to believe that this could get really bad is just take a look at the propaganda the World Economic Forum's putting out. I don't know if you guys have seen any of this stuff, like a guy smiling on a billboard, in 10 years, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. Right? They are blatantly saying it out in the open. You need no private property rights whatsoever and you'll be happy. I think there was another one saying you'll have no privacy and be happy. Like, just things that, if you have even a second order level of understanding of what's going on here, are unbelievable. Like, it's very blatant communist propaganda out in the open. And, that's what Marxism wore, the same moral camouflage, right? From each according to their ability, to each according to their need. Beautiful, poetic, amazing. What was the outcome of that? Millions starved or slaughtered by the state. So I just see the possibility of things going that way, because the World Economic Forum is now putting on this moralistic camouflage that we've seen used in the 20th century. That concerns me. One of the ways I expect to see this FUD attack vector on Bitcoin next is the environmental aspect. That is a very easy thing to point at for Bitcoin, is that it utilizes a lot of energy. So if you've got a lot of people only thinking one order deep, you just say, hey, this thing is bad for the environment, it's causing global warming, it's collapsing the banking system, we need to shut it down. It becomes a very publicly viable attack vector for Bitcoin. And so I expect to see that one in the next decade, especially if it's really doing its thing here. And the real answer to that, just to speak to it a little bit, is, and I would encourage people to read, there's a book by Rothbard called The Libertarian Manifesto. And he has a chapter in there called Conservation in the Free Market. I think that's the right book. I'll have to check on that. But you can Google conservation in the free market, and it's a free chapter on Mises.org. The way to actually protect and conserve the environment is through the enforcement of private property rights. Private property rights can be translated into social responsibility. When someone owns something, they have an incentive to take care of that thing for the long term, whether it's a river, whether it's a piece of land, a building, a car, whatever it is. Once you establish a relationship between man and asset that is mutually acknowledged and exclusive, that man who holds that property has an incentive to care for that property. That is the answer to ecological disaster. So with the state pushing these narratives of capitalism being bad for the environment is total BS, right? We need strong private property rights. That's how we care for the global environment. Now, this is very tricky because I think as soon as you say the words private property rights, the neo-Marxists of the world to sort of gloss over, right? It's exactly what they're arrayed against. But that is the answer. So I'm trying to think about how we phrase that. It's not a private property right per se, it's a property responsibility. And enforcing that is how we take care of the environment. So there's that in a nutshell. Like World Economic Forum, scary communistic regime coming into power. They're printing money like crazy. They're violating everyone's private property rights. And then they're going to turn around and likely point the finger at Bitcoin for being the cause of the problems we're going to see that they've caused over the next decade. So my advice to Bitcoiners in general is to, clearly be aware of all this and then develop a strategy for yourself, for your holdings, for your security model, your OPSEC, and don't deviate from that, right? Particularly in the price cycles. Emotions tend to run really high near the top of bull markets and near the bottom of bear markets. So if you let emotions take you over in those times, you're gonna do something wrong, frankly, because emotions just cloud your pragmatism. So I suggest establishing a strategy and resisting deviation. I'm not saying you should never deviate, you should always be adaptive, but once you've got something that you've developed in a calm, cool, deliberated mind, try to let that be your default. And yeah, just back to the original point is have a lot of optionality. Again, read the book The Sovereign Individual. That is the best guidebook for the world I think we're moving into. And get ready for anything, because anything is possible.
%. Thanks so much, Robert. That's that kind of paints the picture of why I think all of us are getting involved in this. Really it feels as though we're preparing for battle in a lot of ways, and it reminds me of this feeling of, well, at least for me, when I was seeing all of the lockdowns and everything happen, it created a lot of urgency, right? Where okay, I see this trend, I see everything happening. I need to take the time to learn to understand the new game, the rules for the new game in Bitcoin in particular, in order to navigate this new world that we're moving into. And I almost see this the Cosmic Deep Dive event is like a boot camp in a lot of ways, preparing whoever wants to come for the journey ahead. So I know I want to be respectful of your guys' time. I'm really grateful for having you on, or for you guys coming. And if you guys have any closing thoughts.
Oh, I appreciate that. I actually do have to jump. I ran over the hour here. I got to get to another meeting, but awesome. Always good to see you guys. And I'm looking forward to the event.
See you too, Robert.
Be well.
All right.
All right, guys. See ya.
See you guys.
I think I would say, to the point of being prepared for anything, I think in addition to that, we need to be aware of that, like, there's going to be this really crazy psychological war that's going to happen against Bitcoin. And I think for me, the preemptive example that I have is, I remember back in February when it was clear that COVID was going on, it was circulating. My wife was pregnant at the time, and I was like, we need to wear a fucking mask in the store. Like we have no idea what's going on. Like, wear a mask, wear gloves. Like, let's do that. And we would go in the store, and we'd be the only people with a mask and gloves on. People would be looking at us like fucking weirdos, leering at us. Some people even made comments to me before, and then, flash forward 2 months, everybody's got their mask on in the store. If you don't have your mask on, people are getting in your face, conflicting with you. And like, it was such a blatant 1984 style bait and switch. And like, I'm not speaking to the dangerousness of the virus or anything, but I'm just speaking simply to how powerful the propaganda of the state is. And when they start to mobilize themselves around a dialogue about something. And I very sincerely think if we go into a hyper Bitcoinization cycle, that's part of the state, like clamping down, shutting down exchanges, trying to seize people coins. We will see hyper Bitcoinization in that cycle. And part of that's also going to be like, if you own Bitcoin, like, you'll go to jail. Like, we're tracking everybody. Like, you people are criminals. You want, and like, it's going to 10x itself. And I just want to really emphasize that, like, that is part of the trick of trying to get you to panic sell your coins, to run away from this, to not think critically about all these things. And it's really important because, if you do follow their lines and follow some of these traps, I think it's going to end pretty poorly. Like, maybe they'll give us some deal if we turn ourselves in, and we'll get, I just don't believe it. And so I think it's really important, be aware, keep your keys off. You should be totally in control of your private keys. If you have a bunch of stuff loaded up on various exchanges, you should consider getting it off. And then the final one is just the shitcoin attack, like, which I think is like the final eclipse, where you get Bitcoin, but then it's like, oh, like, check out this other thing. Like, it's better because it's turning complete, or, it has like a fart algorithm or something. I don't know, but I guess I just want to emphasize that, like, that's kind of the secondary attack as well. And just to be aware that, and I'm not trying to say, like, if you're interested in investing in altcoins because of whatever your reason is or speculation, that's fine. But, like, don't classify it in the same way as Bitcoin. I really think treat Bitcoin as savings, set it aside, understanding that it's a deflationary asset, and that when you revisit it in the future, as with a real long-term savings plan, when you revisit it 2, 4, 8 years down the line, you now have a nest egg that's going to, at the very least, hopefully be somewhat larger than what you started out with. If you're real lucky and you started back in 2014, you're probably doing pretty well. So I just wanted to kind of emphasize those points before we went.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that. And, we've finished on somewhat of a somber note about, how difficult and challenging this may become. And I agree, again, that it's prudent to assume that it will, and to act in that way, and to prepare yourself accordingly. But, and I agree, the FUD is going to come. The more disruptive Bitcoin is to the legacy system, the more people are going to come out of the woodwork with all sorts of different things. And, not all the things that were already said, absolutely. But, and this is a really interesting dynamic in this space, is that a lot of people have obviously chosen to remain anonymous, and that is completely rational. And I understand that totally. And I respect it. And, I hope that works out for the people that make that decision. But I couldn't be one of those people for whatever reason. But in addition to taking all the necessary measures, I do think it's like metaphysically good to speak what you believe to be the truth. And so when all of these people come knocking about, how bad, whatever it is, whatever the FUD is, whatever the attempts at, co-opting this or controlling this or shutting this down, I want to be a voice that's going to genuinely and honestly speak out what I believe to be is important and truthful about this and what's happening here. Again, just, obviously it's just one voice, but there's something good about doing that, about speaking what you believe to be the truth. And I think there's a power in that too. And what I guess I'm hoping is both in the moment saying that, but again, why I'm such an advocate of people just expressing themselves in whatever way is natural to them, podcasting, writing, whatever, is because I want to, I think it's beneficial that there's such an enormous library of these types of conversations where anyone tuning into this tonight from Normie Land, let's say, they may think we're a bit idealistic. Maybe they think we're a little bit too wrapped up in this. Maybe they think, we don't understand how things really work, quote unquote, whatever, however we appear in their eyes. But I don't think we would appear to them to be evil. I don't think we would appear to them to be stupid. I think there's something in the way these conversations are happening that communicates something far greater than what we're actually articulating when we fumble around with our words, trying to say what's in our mind. The manner in which we're engaging in this is the most important message that we can send. And so, I think there's great value in that. And that's one of the reasons why I chose not to be, anonymous in this thing, so that when people try to deride and disparage this thing and the people that are involved in it, I'm hoping that there's enough out there that people can point to and say, are you talking about those people? Because they don't seem like they're trying to do other people harm. They don't seem like they're trying to scam or do evil. They seem like they have good intentions and they're trying to go about it the best way they can, they can muster. And there's a power in that, and we'll have to wait and see how much. But I think the more evident it is that people are engaging in a certain manner in that way, the harder it will be to convince the world that we're, a bunch of evil people trying to take over the world or boil the oceans or whatever the attacks end up being.
That's a really inspiring message, John, and it's really encouraging for me as well. Just because I've reflected on this as well, just launching the Bitcoin Path and trying to get my voice out there. Wondering like, well, what does the future look like? Is it always going to be a free realm on the internet to just openly talk about Bitcoin? And what kind of parties out there might take your name and search for whatever horrible shit they could dig up in order to slander you? It's always in the back of my mind. There's a lot of scary shit, right? Like as we all know, going on. So, but it's at the end of the day, what I came to as well was like, I want it. If you want your life to be meaningful, if you want your life to represent something, why not have it represent freedom and what you actually believe, and speak truly, like how you can see truth as best as possible, and let the cards fall where they may. I hope, yeah, I think that's a great sentiment, and I hope that more people feel the same way, because like Robert was saying, the world that we live in is so stifling, and in the business realm and in the social media realm or whatever, there's the allowable opinion is kind of narrowing and narrowing. So I'm really like, it gives me a lot of hope to just, interact with guys like you who are out there speaking truth and putting their name to it. And so thank you for that.
And yeah, I mean, I appreciate those words. And one final point, what Robert was saying, which is again why I think there's so much energy being built up around the people in this space is Rob said that he felt like he wasn't being himself. He felt like he was restricted in some way. And I remember saying these words to, friends and family in 2016 and 17. And like, I was always a bit different. I was always the one to kind of express different ideas and stuff. But even beyond that, I would be telling people, like, I feel so contained. And they'd be like, what do you mean? I was like, I'm not really sure, but I feel contained. That's the only word that's coming to my mind. And I think what that was my perception of what the world was, and who I wanted to be. There was no congruency there. They couldn't line up. And what I think is part of the reason why people like Robert, myself, and Erik, and a bunch of other people come into the space, and they're quote unquote set on fire, they're set free, or they're opened up. They have this endless wellspring of energy to express themselves, is because there's finally a feeling of congruency with the world. The world has lined up to make a little bit more sense, to be more in line with who you think you are at core. And that is such a powerful feeling, to have congruency with the world around you, and to know that, beyond that, the only mediating factor is how much you lean into it, how much you're willing to push into that, and to dig around and see what can emerge from that sort of alignment. And so, and I see that from, the pleb on Twitter with 10 followers to, whoever big famous person talking about, Sailor, like in our conversation, talking about his transformation and how profound it was. And it's obvious to see anybody who listens to him now versus a year ago. And so just seeing seeing the goodness in people finally align with a spark of goodness in the world, and then just building on that fire to, try to spread it even further, is so fucking exciting, man. And it's so motivating. And, I got goosebumps right now just saying these words. I mean, it's unbelievable. And like Rob said, like, as fucked up as the world is, as challenging as the times that maybe on the horizon are, I'm just so unbelievably grateful to be around for this. And so, giddy up, motherfuckers.
Hell yeah. Yeah. What's up?
I appreciate hearing all that from you, John. I needed that. It was good to talk with you guys. And yeah, I was just feeling a little down for other reasons, but yeah, but it's always good to get to kind of revisit it and link up minds, just because it always leaves me feeling inspired and more zealousful. And yeah, now I want to go write something, and like, and I would have never put that expression out there without Bitcoin. And it's we've gotten a rap about this, but yeah, it's a really beautiful experience that has left me getting to relax into myself, I think, is what it is. It's because I always, without the kind of freedom that Bitcoin offered me, and not just monetarily, but I think more of like the true actual security that I get in knowing that money is there and available for me no matter what. Because also, like, I have very radical beliefs about the government. Like, I sincerely believe that like a van will show up with like a bunch of dudes to like throw a black bag over my head at some point. And like it's funny, but like I do expect that. Just because
I mean, if you read is it Frankel's Man's Search for Meaning, he talks about that. Like when you get when you hear the noise of people breaking into your house at 3 a.m. in the morning, like, it's too late. You're gone. Like, they have you.
We really, I mean, I laughed just because that's the kind of the reflexive reaction. But we live in a time, not trying to cause you more anxiety, Erik, but like, we live in a time where it's not inconceivable that things like that happen. Now, it might just be because someone said you have 10 people in here tonight, sir, and you're only allowed 3. Now we're going to bang down your door and take you all to prison. But that's the point, is that the justifications for the infringement on freedom are getting broader and broader and broader and broader, to the point where someday that net, it's very possible that it will capture you in it. And all of us, and that's the concern when we find ourselves in a scenario where anything can be justified, because we've done away with the absolutes, be they religious, moral, legal, or otherwise, economic. And so, that's why Bitcoin is so important, because it's a economic absolute that allows us to build so much around it, and not allow it to be violated willy-nilly based on whatever half-baked, philosophies are the taste of the times,
flavor of the
flavor of the
week.
month or whatever.
Yeah.
I was thinking soup du jour, but I was like, no, that's not it. So yeah, I mean, it's again, it's one of those things that I think we you right at the beginning, you were talking about like potentially some downsides of being involved in Bitcoin, and maybe we don't have the time to get into that here, but like one obviously is like striking the balance between what your perception is of the hope for the future and what your perception is of the existing state of affairs, and what balance you want to strike in, because it's all just perception. I mean, I'm sure there's veracity and validity to a lot of the things that we've been articulating, but we can't separate our own subjective biases and fears and all the rest of it from that perception. So, we got to try to figure out, like, almost irrespective of what the quote unquote truth is, because, we could never find, it's totally subjective. So what's the most optimal perspective to have for navigating what you believe to be the circumstances of our reality right now, and you got to try to feed that and manage that accordingly. So,
yeah, that's huge. You guys, that was an epic discussion. I just want to thank you again for joining us, and for anyone listening who wants to come here, these guys, John, Erik, Dan, Robert, and Max and Gigi, we talked to them yesterday. And if you want to go a little deeper into all of this stuff, join us this weekend. Learn more about the event at cosmicdeepdive.com. And until next time, may you live a meaningful life and enjoy your freedom as a sovereign individual. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Have a great one.
All right.